Hello YouTube, and welcome to another Elder Scrolls lore video. Today we're talking about the story of the Morakthong assassin Naryu Virian, a fan favorite character of most of the Elder Scrolls Online players and someone who accompanies you through multiple quests. Much of her backstory is very poorly documented online, I saw, so I felt like she definitely deserved her own video after taking the time to research it. That said, let's delve right into her story. Naryu Virian is an assassin of the Morakthong that we meet every so often in the Elder Scrolls Online as we're completing our own quests. She is witty, ruthless, flirtatious and often sarcastic, usually having a very zero shits given attitude. This big personality made her a fan favorite character to many Elder Scrolls Online players from the start, and considering her influence on several different quests in the game, it positions her as one of the more interesting characters in the game as well. Naryu, as an assassin, is extremely skilled with blades and received the nickname the Mother of Blades by some characters in the game. But not only is she very skilled with the blade, as we learn that she's been able to complete Morakthong contracts by many means, using many different weapons over the years. Now, not just talking about weapons, I mean, it's said that she used steel pots, bed sheets, hairpins and even a copy of the 24th Sermon of Vivek to kill with even the most unlikely objects as weapons. In addition to that, she often uses her feminine traits to her advantage, as she is not afraid to seduce people that are obstacles that are standing in her way in order to get information or access. And by the men and women that she's seduced over the years, and there have been many, she's been given the nickname Beautiful Darkness. Not much is known about her early life, but what we do know of it we learn from her journal, which you get included with the physical collector's edition of the Elder Scrolls Online Morrowind. From this journal and the snippets of story that we get from the game, we learn that Naryu was born in the small town of Saidanane on the southern end of Vvardenfell's bitter coast, the place where both the ESO Morrowind and the game Morrowind both start. She was, as far as we know, the only daughter of the influential Morakthong assassin Myahalar Virian, a serious and quite humorless man from what we find out. But when she was a young kid, Naryu didn't really have a whole lot of interaction with her father, as he was presumably always away for most of her childhood, busy with Morakthong contracts. This meant that she was mostly raised by her aunt, who would put her to work to fish and hunt in the swamps of Morrowind. The game Naryu would bring back to her aunt would sell on the Saidanane market, and then would mostly spend the money that they made on booze for herself, or at least according to Naryu's journal. During this time, she writes that she would often land in prison and was too stubborn for her own good, according to her father. However, once she came of age, her father would take her in as an apprentice assassin for the Morakthong, and she would start her career as a great killer. During this time, her father also adopted an orphan Dunmer boy by the name of Odral Quintain, who would become Naryu's adopted brother. They would often train in the town of Balmora, and Naryu and Odral would make friends with the two young nobles of House Redren by the names of Vea and Ulron Releth. As her training progressed, she likely found out that she had an extremely good memory, almost photographic, as to this day she can easily remember every experience, every view and conversations that she's ever had. Something, according to herself, makes her such an extremely effective assassin, as she knows the places she's been to only once, and faces that she's only seen once like the back of her hand. And according to herself, it also makes her a very good lover for, well, obvious reasons. Over the years, she developed a very strong belief in the Morakthong creed, namely that their sanctioned murders keep war from breaking out between the great houses of Morrowind, and as such, she also developed a great dislike for wars in general. After some time of training her and her adopted brother, her father retired from the Morakthong and left for the island of Vonura, the mysterious island for retired assassins of the Morakthong. They basically go there so that they can't be hunted down in their retirement. Her training then became the responsibility of a new mentor, a guy named Varon Davil, who would also become a good friend of her after her training. Interestingly enough, at this point her skill had become so apparent that not only Varon wanted to train her, but many others also volunteered, among whom was Asher, the assassin that we talked about during the Hashkashay video. He really wanted to train her because he saw her really great skill. But unfortunately for him, Varon would have the honor to continue her training. During this time of training, she became very successful in the Morakthong and undertook various missions all across Tamriel. For example, we know that during this period she came into contact with another fan favorite character, Razumdar, an Eye of the Queen in the employ of the Altmerry Dominion. In the game we find out that Razumdar calls her beautiful darkness as well, meaning that she probably seduced him back in the day on a mission. Nonetheless, none of them seems to really hold any grudges against one another, and Raz, to this day, still really seems to very much like her, as he gets very conscious about his appearance and his wishes that he can give her presents when they meet. Anyway, she says that during her training with the Morak Tong, she survived through both the Kanathan flu and the second Akaviri invasion. And by the time you meet her, she's been with the Morak Tong for about a century, meaning that when we meet her, she's likely around like 115 to maybe 120 years old, depending on when her father thought that she was old enough to join the Morak Tong. We, as the player, first meet her when she's in the final stages of her mentorship of Varandavel, when she and her mentor are investigating the Lodos plague that's been ravaging the Dajan region of Morrowind. The two assassins have gotten a contract to assassinate the person responsible for creating the Lodos plague, and they will help you in your fight against the Malborn who created the plague. But more about that in my video on the plague itself, which I uploaded a few weeks ago. During this first meeting, Naryu will come to see you as a dependable ally and will help you further after you've been able to stop the plague from spreading. She then helps you with your investigation into the Malborn in Mournhold, as the two of you discovered during the plague investigation that the Malborn plan to attack Almalexia's great city. You two then successfully foil the Malborn's plan by finding them in an old Morak Tong hideout and help Almalexia deal with the Malborn. The next time you find her in-game is in Eastmarch, several weeks after your exploits in Dashan. You'll find her in Fort Amol, where she's working on a contract to assassinate a Breton alchemist named Dalen. It just so happens that this Dalen wishes to interrupt the Ebonheart Pact political conference taking place in the fort by killing the leaders and replacing King Yoren, something which you, as the player, wish to prevent, and thus your interests are once more aligned and you team up with Naryu once more to prevent this possible massacre. Together you two uncover Dalen's plan and manage to save King Yoren and several political leaders. However, you're not fully successful in saving them all, unfortunately. Dalen, however, gets killed by you and Naryu, and thus her contract is complete and she once more bids farewell to you. This is the story that most Elder Scrolls Online players will probably have already known about if you played the story of the Ebonheart Pact. However, it's at this point that Naryu's journey starts to take on a journey of her own, mostly without the involvement of you as the player. Because when we read Naryu's journal, we learn what happened to her in the months after you two stopped the killing of High King Yoren. Upon her return to Morrowind, Naryu was summoned by the Grand Master of the Morak Tong, a man named Raith Verano. He told her that 7 high-ranking Morak Tong agents were planning to betray the Morak Tong. Among the traitors were some of her friends and even her adopted brother, Odral Quinton. The Grand Master then proceeded to give her writs of execution for each of the 7 secretives, as he called them, meaning that according to Morak Tong law, they were now already dead, and the assassin, Naryu, had issued the writs to kill the targets, and there was no other way than for her to kill them. For the first time in a long while, Naryu felt conflicted about her writs, but she accepted the job had to be done and prepared herself. But before she went on her way to kill the target, she decided to rummage through the office of the Grand Master in order to find out what exactly the traitors had done. That is when she found out that each of the traitors had been under the leadership of Grandmaster Verano, and that he planned to use them to make the Morak Tong stronger than ever, a true political force itself instead of a neutral organization, as a revenge for the way the Morak Tong had been treated in the past several years. And now the Grandmaster wanted to have his accomplices killed so that they could serve as scapegoats and he, as Grandmaster, could assume total power. This was a grave breach of Morak Tong creed. However, the only ones allowed to judge breaches of the creed are Grandmasters, so Naryu couldn't really do anything about it as the Grandmaster was the one at fault, so instead she went to the highest power in the land, which was the living god Vivek. She presented Vivek with the evidence of Verano's betrayal during her audience and asked him for permission to kill Verano extrajudicially, in order to save the Morak Tong's position in Morrowind's law order. The living god granted her this permission, and Naryu, together with a warden agent of Vivek, started to hunt the Grandmaster. We see the final stages of this hunt play out in the first trailer of the Elder Scrolls Online Morrowind, where Naryu ambushes the Grandmaster for his treachery. However, after the Grandmaster lay dead, she still had the writs of execution for the 7 secretives, who were all across Tamriel trying to do Verano's bidding by collecting powerful artifacts that the Morak Tong would be able to use to gain more power. Naryu, helped by the oaths that she swore, realized that she'd have to track them down and kill them, according to the Morak Tong creed, as the writs had already been issued. She then took the skull of the dead Grandmaster and proclaimed that if she was to kill her friends, his skull would come along for the journey so it would see what it had caused. She then traveled all over Tamriel with the skull, basically to all the DLC areas that released before Morrowind, and journeys through them as she hunts down the 7 secretives, going through Hrothgar, Craglorn, Hughesbane, the Clockwork City, and even infiltrating the Daedra-infested Imperial City. On this journey, she also kills her adopted brother, something that she feels quite sorry for, but realizes that there was no other option, as he too had no intention of stopping the plan of making the Morag-Tong its own political entity, even without the Grand Master, as he'd basically been indoctrinated by the Grand Master. The final stop of this journey to kill the 7 takes her to the Gold Coast, to the city of Kvatch specifically, where she tracked down a man named Dathus Ildram, who was trying to infiltrate the Dark Brotherhood in order to subjugate them to the Morag-Tong. Dathus was posing as a simple merchant on business and was hiding out in Kvatch Castle. Unfortunately, Naryu made the bad decision here as she made her face known to the guards prematurely by seducing one and thus couldn't get into the castle using its disguise like she normally would. Fortunately for her, you as the player are along for this final part of her quest, as your stories once again overlap. We get to see the last part of this journey that she's undertaken to kill down the 7 secretives in the quest A Cordial Collaboration in the Gold Coast, where Naryu asks you for help to infiltrate the castle, and we can find her a way into the castle and then together kill Dathus. Naryu is very happy about your help and is by now starting to take a liking to you. However, before she can seek you out to properly thank you, she finds out that the Dathus that you guys killed was a body double and not the real one, and thus she once more goes on her own way to kill the real Dathus this time, who has taken refuge with the Order of the Hour in an attempt to recruit them for the Morag-Tong after recruiting the Dark Brotherhood has failed. His logic was, the Dark Brotherhood and the Order of the Hour hate one another, so maybe the Order of the Hour then wants to help the Morag-Tong. But that was pretty much a move born out of desperation, as Naryu already says in her journal. Ultimately, Naryu manages to slay him anyway and complete her hunt for the 7 secretives. Having killed all of her friends, she sat down at an inn in Anvil for a drink, before leaving for Vardenfell. As she sat alone, she overheard talk of a murderer in town, nicknamed the Sweet Roll Killer. This killer would seemingly kill random people, but before they were murdered, these people would receive a sweet roll with a threatening note baked into it. Naryu found this very interesting, and found it even more interesting when very soon after hearing this story about the killer, she received a sweet roll herself with a threatening note in it. This initially simply made her laugh, and instead of hiding away from the murderer, she started to investigate the murders herself. This investigation led her through all of the Gold Coast and eventually clashed with another investigation into the killer. Specifically, your investigation into the killer, as you as the player had been investigating the killer yourself together with the Altmeri agent, Razumdar. I'm gonna be honest with you here. This quest is probably my favorite quest in the entire game, and no narration I can do it justice. Please play this quest if you haven't. It's a bit of a hidden quest and it has several prerequisite quests, but I promise that you won't be disappointed, and I won't spoil who the killer is or, you know, who your investigation eventually points to, as this is really one of those quests you want to do yourself. Anyway, together with Naryu and Razumdar, you as the player find out who the killer is, and that this killer is working for a group called the Fate Bearers, who are a group of vagabonds following the sayings of a sort of fortune teller. I'll keep it as vague as possible without spoiling it. Anyway, out of this fortune teller comes prophecies about people, and the people who have negative prophecies, for example, they will kill someone someday, these people need to be killed according to this group, and for that they have the Sweet Roll Killer. See? I have no idea who the killer is, you can still play the quest, and I still did my job of being a lore man. Great. Anyway, play the quest, it's really good. Please, just play it. Alright, so Naryu was apparently being targeted because her daughter would one day have the power to cause the world to burn. This was a particularly strange prophecy, as Naryu doesn't even have children, but we'll come back to that at the end of the video. Anyway, after foiling the plans of the Sweet Roll Killer, you can speak to Naryu one last time before she departs back to Vardenfell. She confesses to you that she quite likes you now, and that she wouldn't really mind keeping you around if you were around in the future. If you make the right dialogue decisions and have the ability to persuade her, she kisses you before promising that if you come and look for her in Vardenfell, you'll get far more than a kiss then. So, off to Vardenfell we go. Immediately. Well, actually not immediately, as between your meetings clearly some time has passed, as when you reunite with Naryu, you've been employed as a mercenary to find the daughter of Councillor Releth. And it turns out that you and Naryu wouldn't really have any chance to do any kisses this time, as it turns out that for the first time you two are on opposite sides of a conflict. because you'll find out that Virian, the counselor's daughter, has fled home and has turned to Naryu to become her apprentice in the Morag Tong. Remember Virian from the beginning of this video? She was one of the siblings that always watched Naryu train as kids and who would become friends with her. Now it turns out that Virian fled home after her other sibling, her brother Ulran, had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. For once now, you and Naryu find yourself on two ends of a problem, across from one another, as she wishes to protect Virian from her father and help her become an assassin like she wants, while you've been hired to bring her home to her father. However, due to your shared history, she doesn't really want to be in your way and rather wishes to work with you. You two then decide that you want to work together and to try and please both parties by having Virian talk to her father at least about her motivations and then maybe persuade her father to allow her to become an assassin because, you know, Virian just fled home without telling her parents anything of where she went. But in order for Virian to be willing to talk to her father, because her father doesn't really want to tell her anything about what happened to her brother, she wants to find out what happened to her brother. So, between contracts, Naryu helps you with your investigation into Ulran, as you two need to find out what happened to him before Virian is even willing to talk to her father. From that point on, you two discover that something fishy is going on, and that likely Virian's father, the counselor, is involved in his disappearance. And that some of the other high-ranking council officials are also involved in Ulran's disappearance. And from the moment that you discover that, you and Naryu basically have to parent Virian as she becomes very impulsive and wants to go and investigate every lead herself while mercenaries search for her and kill people outside of Morag Tong jurisdiction that have hurt her. Eventually, you and Naryu failed to stop her from running off after discovering that Ulran was set up in a secret loyalty test by her father, which he failed, after which he was exiled, and in his exile he was killed by mercenaries under the employ of her father and one of her brother's former best friends, Captain Briven. Virian then runs off from you and Naryu and by herself kills everyone in Captain Briven's squad and then heads to a secret counselor's meeting to kill her father and the captain himself as a revenge. At the council meeting, she kills her father and then nearly kills all the other counselors, but you and Naryu fortunately manage to stop her, knocking her out after an intense fight. After this fight, Naryu fears for her future with the Morag Tong, as all these kills Virian committed were outside of Morag Tong creed and rules, and she was her responsibility, as she was the mentor of Virian. Luckily for her, the counselors that had survived basically offered her to sweep the entire affair under the rug and be silent about the Morag Tong's involvement in it all. Naryu then had the choice to either send Virian on exile far away or kill her, as to Vvardenfell she had to be dead, as her survival would put them both in danger of other Morag Tong agents if they ever found out about Virian's actions. You as the player can advise on this, but the canon choice seems to be that Virian is sent away by Naryu towards the Somerset Isles, the furthest place away from Morrowind that's possible, where she would become an apprentice under a new mentor, someone not affiliated with the Morag Tong but who could keep Virian in check, namely an old acquaintance of Naryu, Razumdar. Yes, she sends Virian towards Raz, but as ESO Somerset players will know, she never really reaches Raz, as Virian will play an important role in the Elder Scrolls Online Somerset, but that is a completely separate story for another video. After sending Virian away at the harbor of Vivec City, Naryu is understandably still quite mad at Virian for putting them both at risk with her reckless actions, but she's happy with all the help that you as the player have given her. She then also tells you that after the two of you head into the Vivec City together, that she received another message by the Fate Bearers, you know, the guys with the sweet roll killer, who told her that her daughter would have the world burn, possibly. Well, they send her another new message saying that by foiling their operation with the sweet roll kills and her further actions, she has caused spreading darkness that may consume the world. Luckily, Naryu isn't really scared and thus doesn't really worry about it, but we as the player may have realized by now that the prophecy may or may not have been about Virian, who will become a powerful antagonist in the Somerset Isles DLC, as Naryu got the original sweet roll before taking Virian in, and thus the future wasn't set yet, so if Naryu had been killed, then Virian wouldn't have been able to become the antagonist, as Virian would never have been taken into Naryu's service. But then again, that's simply speculation, because, you know, Virian isn't really Naryu's daughter, but we don't know really what the truth behind this is, but I think that's a solid speculation on that part. As you two continue walking in Vivec City, she then also confesses that she has feelings for you if you made the right dialogue choices, and how happy she is that you've always been around for her, and says that one day, perhaps after you both have finished up your business, you two should settle down somewhere together. This dialogue only shows up when you have done literally every quest in her story, from Deshaan to Eastmarch to Gold Coast to Vvardenfell, and serves as a sort of optional romance reward to the player. Honestly, it's one of the few examples where Elder Scrolls Online opens a sort of romance, and not only that, in 2020 and now in 2021 again, ZeniMax released their official, and yes, really official, text-based game called Smolder Scrolls Online on Valentine's Day. This text-based game, developed by the Elder Scrolls Online developers themselves, allows you to romance several of the game's most prominent in-depth ally characters, among which is Naryu. So yeah, she's one of the few people you can quite literally romance there, and sort of romance in the main game. But of course, Elder Scrolls Online doesn't really have a romance mechanic. Do with that information what you want. Anyway, this has been my video on Naryu, as I instructed almost all information about her there is into this video. I felt like it was necessary after seeing how poorly documented her background was online, so yeah, I hope you liked the video, and not sure what the future holds for Naryu. I don't think she'll be used again in the Elder Scrolls Online in future expansions, simply for the reason that her story with that final dialogue is kind of closed, it seems. But yeah, who knows, maybe she'll return. We've seen many characters over the years return to Elder Scrolls Online, so we'll see. Anyway, I hope you liked this video, and if you did, allow me to thank my top patrons first. Mr. Bernardo Binda, Mr. Gabriel Binda, and Mr. Christmas. These wonderful people, along with all the others on screen, make my weekly lore videos possible, and for that I am just super grateful, because it's so amazing to still do this after like 5.5 years. Anyway, if you like this video, consider returning next time for the next Elder Scrolls lore review, and yeah, I'll see you next time. Bye bye.